Hello, and welcome to Stories from the View, a podcast from the Pleasant View Senior Center in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. And on this podcast, we invite East Longmeadow residents to tell us stories about their lives and events. Today's guest is Pastor Katherine Mitchell of the East Longmeadow United Methodist Church. Pastor Katherine, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mary Jenowin Kaplan is here today as well as the host. My name is Eric Elmendorf, and we can get started. Last week, we rehearsed for this week, right. So I think that we're ready to go.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. And it's good to see you again, Pastor Katherine.
You too.
Thank you for coming.
You too.
And we so appreciate you're willing to be our newest story from the View. And welcome.
Thanks.
You are a New England person.
Yes, I am.
From the beginning.
Yes, I am.
From the beautiful state of Maine.
I am.
Tell me more.
So I grew up in central Maine in Augusta. And so I spent the school year and the wintertime in Augusta. And then my family has a cottage homestead, or we call it camp in Maine. And it's in northern Maine, well, above Bangor, about 45 minutes above Bangor, on a lake, which sounds very fancy and luxurious, but there's an outhouse and no plumbing, so it's really not that fancy and luxurious.
What's the name of the lake?
It's called South Branch Lake, and it's called, it's not even a town, it's a township, and it's called Savoy's Plantation Township.
Okay.
Yeah. My family have been there for 5 generations.
Wow.
Yeah, deep roots.
Great, wonderful history.
Yeah. We're very blessed to have that little sacred spot, and I go there every summer just to connect with home.
It sounds idyllic, just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So please share with us how you wended your way from Maine to here. It's a great journey, and ended up, for our benefit, in East Longmeadow.
So let's see. There's I'm going to skip out a lot just because it's, the growing up stuff and the choices that you make that you maybe didn't want, in hindsight, wish you hadn't. Life is like that. I went to the University of Southern Maine the first time. And when I graduated from high school, decided it was a very expensive party and I should probably leave until I'm ready to make a true commitment to my education. But I married my husband very young, and we took a job. He was working construction. I was working at the YMCA. And we took a job as house parents for an organization called the Opportunity Farm for Boys. And it was a working farm where people, boys who were struggling with their behavior and were getting in trouble, minor trouble with the law. It was kind of like remember the Boys Town model? I'm sure you've seen the movie. It was similar to that. And so we became house parents. So I was 22 and he was 23, and we had 13 boys under the age of 10.
Oh my.
I always say we were too young and stupid to know how young and stupid we are to choose that. But I learned a lot because my childhood was troubled. I had a lot of difficulty. There was a lot of issues in my family with addiction and mental illness. And consequently, I was able to connect with those boys in a way that maybe somebody else couldn't, to sit with them in their own struggle. So we did that for about a year, and then we were recruited to move to Rhode Island, where we ran a therapeutic foster home for kids with severe behavioral and psychiatric issues. And we worked 16 days, 24 hours a day, and then 5 days of respite, and then back to 16 days, 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. We did that for 8 years.
You knew how to take on a challenge.
Wow.
I know, right? Again, I think it was just like going on faith. Like I'm able to do this. My husband and I both have had, as many people have, difficult upbringing. And so it gave us insight, and we were able to connect with kids on that level because we understood, So yeah, it was a challenge, but boy, I'll tell you, it was a foundational time. So much of who I am as a pastor, but even who I was in my first profession in the, human services field, I learned from that time, that very intense but really important time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. But somehow you felt a calling after that.
Yeah. I've always, I started out as a young teen in a sort of fundamentalist community. And I am willing to say that the fundamentalist church, Assemblies of God Church, saved my life. It gave me a box to live in and how to live and the rules to live by it, so that I was afraid to make choices that would be too destructive. And with the situation in my home life, I could have gotten pretty wild, but I didn't, because I had that church and it saved my life. And I can honestly say I'm here today because of it. But eventually I came to realize that the stuff that they believed was not what I could believe about who God is and how God works in the world. I had a situation where there was an assassination. I think it was Itzhak Rabin when he was assassinated. Mm-hmm. And I remember watching the news about it, and there was a moment where I said he died for trying to make peace in the world. Like, he sacrificed himself to make peace in the world. And then my next thought was, it's too bad he's going to hell. Because that's what my tradition had taught me, right? Mm-hmm. And because he was not Christian, not born again. And that sort of cracked open for me, something's not right.
Conflict.
This doesn't work for me.
You felt a disconnect.
Yeah. And I did what every good 19-year-old would do at the time. I threw it all out. And, I was like, it's all wrong, it's all bad, and threw it out, because that's what you do at that age anyway. It's part of the journey of self-discovery during that time. That's when the party began. And when I eventually decided I needed to leave the University of Maine and get back on the narrow. So I've always been a spiritual person. I read a lot about feminine images of God and religious traditions that focus on the feminine side of the divine. And I had deep spiritual practices, stayed in that human service world. But at one point, after the foster home, I was working at the Community Mental Health Center in Newport, Rhode Island. And I was running a treatment program called dialectical behavior therapy that really integrates spiritual life and spiritual practice into the traditional, cognitive behavioral psychological treatment. And I saw the power of how faith can dovetail with that treatment and really change people's lives. And I just decided that I didn't want to separate my faith life with my my spiritual life with my work life anymore. By that time, I had returned to church, which is actually kind of a funny story. Because of all the spiritual practice and my focus on different kinds of spiritual traditions, in Newport, they had a festival called the Women's Sacred Art Festival in Newport, Rhode Island, where I was living. And I went to a lecture in a congregational church on the spiritual lives of elephants, which was something I would be inclined to do at that time. And turns out elephants actually have profound spiritual lives. When one of them dies, they stop and take a time of grieving before they move on, or one of them is dying, they don't leave it behind. And they have real community and spiritual life. But in that church, it was a congregational church, and on the wall in the room that we were meeting in, there was a painting of Vishnu, the Hindu god. And I was like, what Christian church has got a painting of Vishnu on the walls? And I went home and I said to my husband, who had never been in church at all, I'm going to go check out this church. And he said, all right. And so we went to check out this church, and it was just this incredible community of diverse gender identities and diverse sexual orientations and diverse racially and diverse socioeconomically, and just filled with joy and love, led by a remarkable woman who became my first mentor and pastor. And I eventually discerned the call to ministry in that context. It was quite a journey.
How I don't know if it's karma or fate or serendipitous, but how interesting that.
Yeah, you know, I my theology, the way I understand, like I know how people understand karma, and I totally respect that. For me, just for me, I'm speaking about how I understand God works, is that God is the creative, loving force of the universe. And when we step into that force, and I always use the metaphor of, like, I'm a ballroom dancer, so I use the metaphor of ballroom dancing, that God is the lead, and the religious tradition done well is the steps. You know, for me, Jesus provides the steps, the way to go. Others, it's Buddha or, you know, whatever. And that the Holy Spirit is the music. It's that force of the universe of love in the world that leads and guides us. And all that God or the universe or source, or whatever language you have for God, wants is just for us to step into that lead and follow the dance, you know. And we are who we are. We are in the human condition, even though I do believe that we're all created perfectly, come into the world perfectly created, into a world that distracts us from that, because it's a tough world, right? I mean, it is what it is. But that for me, God just wants that full union. And so we misstep when I'm ballroom dancing and I'm dancing with a lead. I step out of the lead all the time, or I make a misstep or step forward when I shouldn't. And what a good lead does is just gently guides you back into the dance. And the ultimate goal is to create this beautiful, full union, fully embodied experience of what you see when you see someone do a beautiful Viennese waltz or a beautiful rumba, you know, and that God is just constantly persuading us into that. And that's my metaphor, my image. So when I look at my life and where I've gone, what I found is that that's just the dance, you know. And sometimes I've stepped out and, you know, and I had this incredible things happening in my life that persuaded me fully back in, you know. And still to this day, that happens, right? Sometimes I choose things that I'm human. I wish I hadn't. And you learn the mistakes, gain the wisdom, step back into the dance and try again. It's what we all do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We never know where our stories from the view will take us. Thank you.
True.
Thank you. And then what came next?
So through a series of really incredible and difficult events, I ended up in the United Methodist Church, which was in the same town. The church that I was serving, the church that I had discerned my call to ministry in, United Church of Christ, had some incredible struggles, and a large group of us decided that we needed to move on because the ministry that we wanted to do, we couldn't do in that space. And it was pretty remarkable, actually. There's a little Methodist church called St. Paul's United Methodist Church in downtown Newport, one of the earliest Methodist churches in existence, number 95. And our music director at the church I was in was the secretary at the Methodist church. And she asked the pastor there, who was a retired bishop. Methodists have bishops. I did not know that at the time. In fact, I thought his name was Bishop. Everybody was calling him Bishop, but I thought that was his name because I didn't know anybody besides Catholics had bishops, and maybe the Episcopal Church. So I was calling him, Bishop. I thought that was his name. And eventually started calling him Bish because, again, I thought it was his name. And he never corrected me because he was a humble servant leader. And so they said, come here, you can use our church at night, in the evenings, on Sundays, and still gather. And that congregation was very small, very traditional. And here we come, this just ragtag group of the strangest group of Jesus followers you ever want to see, coming all in our differently able, different kinds of couples, different kinds of,
And like what years was this?
So this was 1999, maybe 2000, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Before marriage equality,
Yeah.
all of that. And this very traditional Methodist church filled with retired military, retired Navy, because Newport is a Navy town, just embraced us and loved us. And it was remarkable, really. It was remarkable how their hearts broke open for us, and we had been hurting, and they cared for us. And eventually we became sort of one community. And at that point, to be honest with you, the experience of what had happened at the UCC church was so difficult that I had sort of come to the decision that perhaps I was right in my teens, late teens, and that organized religion was not something that I wanted to be part of. I was hurt by what had happened, and churches are as flawed institutions because they're led by flawed creatures, right? They're also the potential for incredible beauty and love, and they're also the potential for not. And sometimes things happen, and it was painful. But the bishop, Bish, called me on the phone and said, your people are here at this church now, and you need to come here and take care of them. They're your people. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to. I don't think I'm called to it, or I don't think I'm there now because of what's happened. And he said to me, well, then you should probably do it till you do think you're there now, because they love you and you love them and they need you. And he was just this powerful human, and I couldn't not do what he said. He was just this incredible, humble servant leader. And so I said, all right, Bish, I will come and just at least hang out there. It wasn't till a few weeks later, he said, if we need to go to this, he would play this I'm an old man card, which he wasn't. He was perfectly capable, but he'd say, I have to go to Providence to this demonstration for poverty. And I want you to drive me because I'm an old man, kind of thing. He would do that. And I'd say, okay, Bish. And I drove him to this thing. And turns out he was in purple, like he had a purple shirt on. And when he got there, people were like, oh, Bishop White, Bishop White. And then I realized, oh my gosh, that's not his first name. He's a bishop, like an actual bishop. I remember calling my husband on the phone going, there's bishops in the Methodist church. He's a bishop. But he became my mentor and my teacher. And eventually I ended up in seminary at Boston University School of Theology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. And the Methodist Church eventually sent you here.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have bishops, turns out. And so we have what's called an appointment system. We, rather than if you're congregational, you announce we're seeking a pastor, and pastors send their CVs, and it's a call system. You call the pastor to you. For us, we have a bishop and a cabinet who's the people who are in charge of the districts of the New England Conference, and they decide where we're going. Similar almost in some ways to the military. Like, we're only in New England, but our appointments are up every year, and every year they decide, what church we're going to. And I've had 3 appointments. This is my 3rd church on my own as a senior pastor.
And between all of this, you've had a family.
I have.
And your husband moves with you.
God bless him. Yeah, my husband has been, my family's a team. We are very much a ministry team. We always have been. Even when my son was in the Navy for 10 years, he was still part of our ministry, whether it was supportive financially or just morally, but, moral support. But we have always really functioned as a team. But what happened was when the bishop appointed me here in East Long Meadow, where I feel so grateful to be, it was in July 1st of 2020.
Interesting time.
Yeah. So I said goodbye to my previous church on Zoom. which was heartbreaking. We were all devastated that we couldn't hold each other and say goodbye. I'd been there for 7 years. And there was a parade down my road with the cars, which was me standing on the side of the road sobbing with my family, my husband and my daughter. But so I came here in 2020. My daughter graduated from graduate school in 2020. And my son had signed a contract to leave regular Navy, go into the reserves. And his discharge was June of 2020. So in 2020, we all ended up in this move in the middle of COVID. And so at that point, we all decided, let's just all land in East Longmeadow and see what God wants from us from there. And so, because I do believe while the bishop appoints us, God calls us. Like our job as Methodist pastors is to show up in a town like East Longmeadow and for me to look around and say, okay, how is God calling me to serve this community in this time at this moment? And take time for discernment for that, you know? So I greeted my people for the first time on Zoom. And we had some meetings in the parking lot, everybody masked outside in a big spread social distance group through the summer. Of course, trying to learn your congregation that way is incredibly difficult, but we were a good team right from the beginning. It wasn't easy. It was hard. It was really hard. But, you know, when you walk in love, you can do hard things. And we were committed to making it work. And boy, we just worked really hard together to do that. And I'm really grateful to the folks at the church who really worked really hard. And we've created something really wonderful. I'm excited about it.
Tell us some more about the culture of your congregation. I know from the mission, it said the ministry of caring and then fun. I thought, oh, this was going to be interesting. Yeah. But tell us how your community operates.
So if you ask me what is the priority for East Longmeadow United Methodist Church, I would say that they feel called to serve the cause of love and justice in the world. And that means that they are called to be a fully inclusive community. Anybody who's listening may have heard that the Methodist Church itself, the Global Methodist Church, is in a time of real crisis. The denomination is on the edge of splitting up because of some of us feel very strongly that it doesn't matter whether somebody is LGBTQ plus or not. They should have full inclusion in the church, that they are beloved children of God, and there are others who don't. And so we are going to, by 2024, split our denomination. And East Longmeadow had a very long-standing, firm understanding that God's love is love and all people are beloved. And so that's where they stand and have long before I got there. So it's my privilege as someone who feels that way to be able to serve a church that feels that way is really powerful. But it's not just that. I mean, they are focused regularly on using their privilege. They're consciously aware of their privilege and seeking to use it to serve the cause of people who don't have the same privilege. And they are generous, incredibly generous. They support the food pantries here and others in the area, and they have. They're at a time after COVID that so many churches are that we're discerning, like, where are we called to be and how are we called to serve right now? Like, because everything's changed, the world has changed, and so we're figuring that out. But we're doing it with intention and seeking to know where we can serve the cause of love and justice in the world. We're very conscious of the rise of white Christian nationalism, and we speak about it. We stand against it. We ask ourselves, in what ways, publicly and privately, are we called to offer a counter message to that? And man, it's such a blessing to get to serve them, you know? We're growing spiritually. I'm trained as a congregational spiritual director, so I push them a little bit sometimes, like, okay, today we're going to try meditation and we're going to do this new kind of thing. Or we're going to I'm going to teach you how to do labyrinth prayer. And they're game. They're like, all right, let's do it. So
now there may be some that do not know what labyrinth work is. So can we describe that on a podcast and radio terms?
I'll try. So there's a difference between a labyrinth and a maze. A maze, like you do remember when we were kids, you'd take the maze out of the newspaper and the funnies, and you'd have to make your way out from one side to the other, and there were blocks. A labyrinth actually has one entrance and one exit.
I could do that.
Yes.
Because I could get out.
Exactly.
Yes.
There's a reason for that. In a labyrinth, the intention is that the movement of your body and the sort of confusing pattern suspends your thinking and makes you more available to the sacred, the holy, the spirit, or even just if you're not somebody who believes in God or believes in that, just gives you shut your mind down, right? Everybody needs to shut their mind down at some point. Crack your heart, make your heart open, right? Mm-hmm. When your mind is going and going, it's hard to do that. The Buddhists call it monkey mind, right? Your mind is just going like crazy and you can't just be. Sometimes we just need to be. And so the labyrinth, as you're moving through the pattern, it sort of disorients the body enough and the mind enough that it just allows you to just be. You can focus on your breathing and you work towards the center. And it's a very ancient spiritual practice that's been done by, there's cave paintings of labyrinths. There's, archaeologists have found evidence of labyrinths in lots of ancient cultures. There's probably the one that's the most famous is the labyrinth, the Chartres labyrinth, which is on the floor of the Chartres Cathedral in France. And it's part of spiritual practice throughout history. And so I got very engaged with, I have a labyrinth tattoo on my arm. I got very engaged with labyrinth practice because monkey mind is an issue for me. And took a class to become a labyrinth practice facilitator. So I have been leading public workshops, helping people to use this practice to sort of relieve stress and engage in the sacred if that's what they want, or just to be, gain insight.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Different ways that you connect with the congregation and they connect with each other.
Yep.
Tell me more about the support of your congregants and how your church operates as a network family group.
Yeah. So the one thing that's really cool about East Longmeadow United Methodist Church that I don't think they even realize how cool it is because it's so rare now. There are multiple generations in the church, which is very unusual now because, first of all, it's not popular to go to church anymore in New England, right? I'm always thoughtful of our young parents who come to church with their kids. We have a beautiful Sunday school, amazing Sunday school, where kids get to talk about the real hard things that are going on in their lives and where their faith is in it. And they also get to know that no matter who they are, this community loves them and has their back. They know they have a people to belong to. And there's real power in that. Research shows that even now, kids who grow up in some sort of faith community do better. They have a stronger ability to resist temptation and to make better choices. And they're more willing to stand up to bullies and if they have a good, strong faith community. And we try so hard to make sure our kids know that they are loved and beloved and we got them, and they can be whoever they want in church. They don't have to follow the social pressure of their environments in school. But we really have been intentional, especially since coming back from COVID, to really understand ourselves as a intergenerational church. Like, you can be a multi-generational church. It means you have lots of generations, but we want to be an intergenerational church, which means our small children are very much in relationship with the seniors in the congregation, and the congregation understands this is my kids. These are my kids, not just their kids. And we take that, that old proverb, takes a village. We take that very seriously. And the kids know that, and they know that they are beloved. And it's such a cool thing to be serving a church where there's grandmas and grandchildren and moms and dads, and they're all together. People have been, in this church for 40, 50 years, which is so unusual nowadays to have these just generations. So that's very cool.
And if I were to come to your church, or if I were to look through a stained glass window, what would I see that would show me that? How does that manifest itself?
So you would see, first of all, that we don't have stained glass windows. There's some little ones that from the older church. What you'd see is you would come in. It's interesting. We had a meeting, all church district meeting, 3 weeks ago, and as people were leaving, and we had hosted a time of sharing food, and the bishop came, and as people were leaving, they kept saying to me, "I just feel really loved here. Like, there's so much love here," and I felt so proud of that, because that's what we want as people, even if they're only there for 3 hours, to feel like who you are and how you are matters to us, even if it's just for 3 hours. Now, I'm not saying that we're perfect, because we're not. We are incredibly human. And, all the struggles that come with that, being in community, we have, like everyone else. But that's the point, really. I mean, the whole point of church, for me, is not about like getting massive big amounts of money and groups of people and we used to call it butts and bucks, like butts in the pew and lots of money.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what it is. For us, it's the church is a place to be authentically who you are, be loved for that, and to work out stuff and to practice how to be a good human. And sometimes that means in conflict. Sometimes I'm not going to agree with you. So practice. How do we talk to each other and disagree in a way that's loving, and that we end in relationship with each other? And we're very intentional about that. And that impressed me so much during COVID, because of course we all came with very different understandings of how we should proceed. Do we stay online? When do we go back? Everybody struggled with that. But I watched this community that I was serving have those disagreements and then walk away still loving each other. When I was hearing stories about other communities,
nobody slammed the door and you heard the squeal of tires.
Yeah, no. I feel so privileged to serve this church, because they work so hard to disagree but then love each other. And sometimes we say things that we wish we hadn't. That's part of it. But then forgiveness is the order of the day, right? That's the foundation of our belief system, is that everyone has the right to make mistakes, and everyone has the right to be forgiven if they seek to redeem the mistake.
Now, Pastor, you've referenced COVID a few times.
Yeah.
And I believe we are all still reeling.
Yeah.
And we will feel the effects of that for a long time.
Right.
It sounds as if the communication, and support in your church is very useful, more at this time than ever, because we aren't always nice to each other.
Well, we're not,
world.
right? We live in a very divided time. And we have very strong feelings about certain things that our siblings who call themselves followers of Jesus Christ are doing in this world. Like, we have issues, but we also believe that we can say, this is the problem that we have with your issue, and the way you're behaving, that you're doing damage to people who are marginalized, but we can do it in love. We don't have to do it by saying horrible things. You know what I mean? And we can, and our job, and we talk about this, I preach about it, we have conversations in our studies about it, is to understand somebody else's context, even if we don't agree with them. understand why they make the choices they do, why they believe the way they believe, because that's our way of sort of being still in relationship with them, even though we're going to stand against what you say and do, because we believe it's doing damage and hurt to people and our society, you know? So we want to disagree, but disagree in love.
Absolutely. And you have mentioned that you love East Longmeadow. I love our community. I know Eric is
Absolutely.
a welcomed and good neighbor in our town. Some might be surprised that a congregation in East Longmeadow is involved in issues like diversity and inclusivity and LGBTQ. Can you talk a little bit about that in our veneer of the Cleaver household and the actuality of what life is like in 2023?
Yeah, you know, that's one of the things that I observed when I came here. You know, my big self-care indulgence, I do get my nails done every few weeks. And I found a woman who's down in the village who I love, who does my nails. And one day I was in there, and we have quite a few kids. We have a lot of kids, but we have one high school kid, and he goes to Chicopee, who I absolutely adore. And we were getting our nails done. I was getting my nails done, and there were 3 girls getting their nails done. It was prom time in the salon.
Big doings.
Yeah, and I was sitting there, and I just decided, having worked with kids for so long, so many years, I wanted to know about the life for kids here. And so I asked the girls, I told them who I was, and I said, you know, I would like to know about how is your life? You know, how is your high school? What have you experienced? And what is life like for a teenager here? Without hesitation, they said, it's really hard. There's so much pressure to be perfect. We're hard on each other. These were all 3 young women who were very attractive. My assumption would have been they would be women with good social power, and which is how the dynamics work in schools, right? Who has social power wins, unfortunately. But yet they were so honest with me about how it has been so challenging. And this is not unique to East Longmeadow, East Longmeadow. This need to appear perfect and that everything's fine. Everything's fine. We're fine. See, we're fine. You know, there's this frantic, like, we're fine. It's good. We're good. We're successful. We're happy. Everybody's happy. And that makes me sad because I think where real relationship happens, where real change breaks through, is when we allow ourselves to be our authentic selves. And to say, I'm not fine. You know, I'm a mess. Here's why I'm a mess. And it offers up an opportunity for someone to say, yeah, me too. And we don't have to be a mess alone, you know? And that's one of the things that I really want to be a support of as I serve this community, not just this church, but this community, to say, come to us, and if you're messy, it's okay. Come and be messy, and we're going to love you and sit with you in it and walk with you until you get back on your feet and hold you up and support you and show you that you are beloved, even in your messiness, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of pressure here to look perfect. And true community, true relationship happens when we're our authentic selves.
And we're not perfect.
No, nobody's perfect. I mean, every church I've ever served, I've been serving for 18 years now. And I can't tell you how many times I've stood in a pulpit and looked out into my congregation of these people who I love with my whole heart and soul. And I'm so privileged that people share their authentic selves with me, and I love them in the midst of even the things they're doing that are destructive behavior, but they know that I love them, and I will sit with them in it, you know? But I will sit there and look at the people in my congregation and know this family is dealing with this really difficult crisis. and they look like everything is just perfect. And on the other side of the room, in that set of pews, that family is dealing with that exact same crisis. Maybe it's the mental illness of a child or marriage trouble or, so many things, or financial issues. And they're acting like everything is perfect. And if they would just talk to each other, they could support each other and love each other and get through it together, But, when you speak to me, it's the confidentiality of the priesthood. I'm not going to tell anybody anything. So they don't know that they exist in the same space with the same exact issues, and that they could really love one another and get through it together. And they don't want anyone to know.
Mm-mm.
And it's so isolating, right? Suffering alone is isolating. And the power of being together in something and supporting one another is transformational. It can make all the difference in the world. So I guess I feel like that's one of my biggest calls here, is just to try to encourage people to be honest and be authentic.
And that unconditional type of love
Yeah.
that everybody can.
And I honestly believe that the people that I serve at East Long Meadow United Methodist Church will be okay with it. You know what I mean? You can come in and maybe you're struggling in your employment, or maybe you've made a mistake in your marriage and things have fallen apart, or maybe you're struggling with addiction. We're going to sit with, it's okay. We will love you in the midst of that. And I really believe that. I honestly believe that. And I'm proud of that for this church, this community.
In this church and this community also works beyond the congregation and has some fascinating projects. Would you share just a couple with us? You're talking about such important issues, but I don't want to miss some things.
Yeah. So probably the coolest thing, the thing that we're kind of really excited about and really cool. So the Methodist Church is a global church, and which is why it's really hard for us to make changes, because we decide as a globe, and it's based on membership, and there are more Methodists in the Ivory Coast of Africa than there are in the United States and Europe combined. And so when we get together to vote on issues, imagine the issues where the Ivory Coast of Africa is compared to where we are when we want to make choices, which is why we are making decisions about how we're going to change our denomination so that we can respond to our communities, right? But in Africa, there are 2 churches in Kenya who are rainbow churches like us, who are standing, and they are doing the work at the risk of their own lives. These pastors are standing up to support LGBTQ plus people, and to say you are beloved and a sacred child of God, who are standing up for women and teaching them about their own body autonomy and teaching them about giving them their own voice. There's these 2 lone pastors down there as Methodists. There are other churches doing it, but as Methodists. And when I first came here, the thing about being in quarantine as we were, there's a lot of time on your hands. And we started thinking about how to use Zoom and the internet in different ways. And I thought, what's going to happen to those pastors and those churches when the denomination goes? Because most of those churches may not go with the more inclusive side of the church. And so I just decided to find them. And so I made a bunch of emails and calls, and somebody connected us, and I connected with these 2 pastors. And I said, hey, you want to meet on Zoom? And they had very limited access to goods, but one was on their phone and the other one had pretty good internet. And so we started meeting on Zoom, Pastor Kennedy and Pastor Ben and I, and we just built this relationship, this friendship over time. And so then, as we decided at East Long Meadow to upgrade our technology, knowing that we were going back into the sanctuary, but we had gathered people online, we wanted to be able to provide a good quality online ministry. So we invested resources that we had been gifted, and a very generous gift from Janet Filer, who was a woman that lived here locally, and she gave us this incredible gift that we want to use to serve. And so we upgraded our equipment so that we could have good quality internet during worship and stuff. But we also sent them the resources to upgrade and access the internet on their end. So now we Zoom them in, and they preach in our sanctuary from Africa. And I've taught Bible study in Africa to a group of women during Christmas time. And we're doing multiple ministries together. We're supporting some of their students to go to school. Education is not free down there. And we support, they gather their whole community. Ben's church, they don't have Christmas like we have because they don't have the affluence, right? So they bring them together for a communal meal. So for a couple of years now, we've paid for that meal for them to have their Christmas dinner together to contribute to that. I bought a goat this Christmas, which was very cool for them to have and we're just in relationship with each other with this church in Africa. And he came, Pastor Ken came here in the fall. They work with another church locally that makes this incredible church in Connecticut that makes reusable menstrual pads so that girls and women don't miss work and school. And they came here for that, and he came up to see us. We're talking about supporting them in creating sustainable ministry there so that they can survive no matter what happens in the denomination. That's our priority, is to make sure that they have what they need to survive. So that's very cool, right? That's really cool.
That's very different.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yep. We also partner a lot with the United Methodist Committee on Relief, which is an incredible organization that responds to disaster and crisis all over the world. And the beauty of it is when you give to the United Methodist Committee on Relief, so like for right now, say you're watching what's going on in Turkey and you want to help, if you give that money to the United Methodist Committee on Relief, 100% of what you give goes to Turkey. You designate it for Turkey and it goes to Turkey because we Methodists take care of all the administrative costs. So because we take care of those costs, the donations that anyone gives to those sites goes right to, that 100% is going right to them.
People love that. If I can give my money and it's going to actually
because
help
a percentage,
100%.
Exactly, because a percentage of a significant percentage goes to administrative costs, and it needs to, right?
Right.
And what we have found other organizations on the ground that we partner with so that we can get quickly to, like we were sending our resources to Turkey immediately and all over the world, refugee crisis. And I don't think there's any place in the world that there aren't some partnership with the United Methodist Committee on Relief. So that's something that we actively support. And we have a prayer shawl ministry. We have this amazing group of women who pray and knit these beautiful prayer shawls. And it just started. We're very excited about this. And then if something happens in your family, you have someone you love who needs to sort of be wrapped in love, you call us and we'll give you this shawl that you can gift to them and say this is surrounded in prayer. We just gave our first one away to a little baby who's in a NICU in Boston. And so that's just a really lovely ministry. And we have a group of men that meets together at the IHOP once a month for fellowship and to support one another. And men don't have that opportunity to share who they are. You're discouraged from doing that, right? And this is cool group of guys that meets together and talks about real things and what's going on in their lives. And there's a lot. It's exciting.
That does sound very, very exciting.
Yeah.
You have so much happening. And
we do.
Absolutely so appreciate your coming here today. If there's anything you've forgotten you'd like to toss in right now, but I, of course, have one last comment. Can you give us a little bit of a call to action? We have hundreds of people who've been listening. And is there anything you can ask of us to do that you think would help sort of the cause of spreading the love? What can we do?
Wow. There's so much. First of all, let me say that if you are interested in our community or just want to watch a service, we have a Facebook page in Shepherd of the Valley. No, not Shepherd of the Valley. I'm sorry. That was my previous church. East Long Meadow United Methodist Church Facebook page. And all of our services we live stream on Sunday, and they're all recorded. They're all there. If you're what can I say about that? There's so much. So I guess I would just say, maybe start by allowing yourself to be vulnerable with people. Be authentically honest about what's going on in your life and share that with someone, which will give them permission to do the same with you. And maybe start to build community. And then I would say, pay attention to what's going on in this world. The temptation is to put our head down and pretend everything's fine. And we're in a time in our history and in this world where there is so much that we need to stand for love, for everyone having equal access to what they need to live fully and to love wastefully, as Bishop Spong says.
And love waste.
To live fully and love wastefully. Love in such a way that just give it away.
Oh, okay.
Just give it away. Waste it, Because no love is truly wasted, right?
Right.
And so I guess that's one thing. I mean, I could give lots of specifics because I'm bossy.
You've got a list?
I'm bossy. I got a list. All you got to do is watch a sermon on Sunday. You'll see, oh man, she's got a list. But, I think that's one way to start.
In our own community, we can look around, tell our story, and maybe try to listen to the stories of others. Yeah.
I mean, this is such a great format, right? If people can come on and just be really authentically themselves and own this is where I messed up, but here's the wisdom I gained, and this is where I've experienced joy, and it just gives us all an opportunity to be real with each other. And I think that can bridge a lot of gaps. For me, in my theological framework, we haven't talked about theology too much other than my ballroom dance metaphor, but in my theological framework, God is in relationship. And where relationship is created, God is present there, right? And so, or something happens. We know this this is basic quantum physics, right? There's entanglement. Something happens when matter connects with other matter. And so connect with each other in real ways.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us this morning. So appreciate getting to know you and hear so much good of things that are happening in our own town.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, well, that wraps up another episode of Stories from the View. We'd like to thank so much our guest, Pastor Katherine Mitchell of the East Longmeadow United Methodist Church. The Stories from the View podcast is available on the LCAT 01028 channel on YouTube. And if you have a story that you'd like to share on the program, contact Pleasant View Senior Center Director Aaron Kobler by stopping by the Senior Center. You can also call Aaron at 413-525-5436, extension 1401, or send her an email at aaron.kobler@eastlongmeadowma.gov. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Stories from the View.